My teenage years were a watershed time for PC gaming, and this is no better represented than with the absolute deluge of superb point-and-click adventure titles made by a variety of developers at the time. And as a totally not awkward dork who listened to Weird Al Yankovic cassettes on a loop, I embraced this form of escapism as my favorite pastime. There was something appealing and even a little bit comforting about the idea of picking up some piece of detritus, clicking it on another object in my inventory, creating some weird contraption, and then using that thing to solve a puzzle and advance to the next area. I enjoyed this significantly more than I did shooting things or jumping on platforms, and the joy of finding a clearance big box title in a bargain bin or a store end cap could be downright euphoric. But while there were many great developers in business at the time, including the prolific giant LucasArts, to me, one company reigned supreme above all else. Known for their large catalog of high-quality adventure titles released during their golden age, Sierra hit home perfectly for me. I love them all, whether deservedly or not, and I obsessively tried to purchase every single one. But in my mind, one particular series stood above the rest. King's Quest, the brainchild of Sierra's co-founder Roberta Williams, who I most definitely did not have a weirdly creepy puppy dog crush on in 1994.
If it's not meant to be this way, why do you haunt me night and day?
Was a perfect storm of fairy tale mythology and historical fantasy. It captured my imagination and did not let go. So, in honor of those many long hours of joyous adventuring, and in anticipation of Ken and Roberta's upcoming title, I decided to revisit the entire series for the first time in almost 25 years with an objective eye unmoved by nostalgia. While there's no such thing as a truly bad King's Quest game, there are some that are certainly weaker than others, and 3, in my opinion, that stand head and shoulders above the rest. Without further delay, let's get started. King's Quest: Mask of Eternity was produced at a time when the public's waning interest in adventure games meant an increase in 3D action titles. At this point, Sierra had been purchased by another company, resulting in mismanagement and a rapidly declining product offering. It seemed as though Roberta knew the company was beginning to implode, and that this was going to be her swan song. It's obvious that she really wanted this to work, but it just doesn't. The game is drab, dark, ugly, clunky, repetitive, uninteresting, and inexplicably violent. I understand that early 3D games like this had to crawl, or in this case stumble, so that modern 3D games could run, but that's not a free pass either. If you're patient enough, then it's worth a playthrough for its story and soundtrack merits alone, but you would not be wrong to just skip it. This was the first title to try a new direction for the series, with the introduction of a cinematic-style story, and for its time it was a pretty impressive feat. You play a slave boy trapped in an evil wizard's mountaintop house, who must steal the secrets of magic right from under the wizard's nose so that you can eventually defeat him with it. This aspect works great, and I badly wanted to love this game, but there are major design issues. Namely the timer. The timer gives you no reliable indication of the wizard's movements. And I realize that this was probably intended to heighten tension in the game, the fear of suddenly being caught doing something you're not supposed to, but it ultimately just makes the game unbalanced. You run around trying to accomplish as much as you can before the wizard catches you, only to stand around and wait, sometimes for 10 minutes or more, for him to appear and trigger the next set of events. Also, the actual act of spellcasting is a frustrating drag. I respect the attempt at breaking a mold, and I desperately want to like this game, but there's a reason they abandoned this formula after this title. So this choice will probably cause grumbling amongst fans, and I understand why. It has a strong following and is generally well liked. But hear me out. The issue with King's Quest VII is that it tried too hard to be different. It adopts a cartoon art style that transforms the characters into these four-fingered monstrosities, and relies heavily on animation and visual cues to relay information, as the dialogue and gameplay have been drastically simplified. This suggests it was designed for a younger audience, namely the then elusive girl gamer metric. But the problem is that the puzzles don't match this goal. They are often too dense and obscure for younger kids to grasp, leaving the game feeling unfocused and confusing. This is a perfect example of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The first sequel in the series is generally unexceptional, and the least memorable. Its short length and reuse of assets from the original makes it feel more like an expansion rather than a proper full-price game. There are still things that make it unique, however, especially the Vampire's Castle, and it is worth a playthrough. The granddaddy of them all, King's Quest, was the first animated graphic adventure game. It was a huge accomplishment for its time, literally creating an entire genre of games that would later become known as point-and-click adventure, and it still holds up relatively well. So I'm probably going to get yelled at again by purists, but I'll just say it anyway. This is the ideal King's Quest I experience. Its development came too soon after the original's release, and it was received very poorly as a result, but honestly, I love it. The original game's design is mostly left untouched, while giving it a new coat of paint. The game looks as good as a 16-color EGA title possibly could at the time, and it contains perhaps the best animation of the series. If you play one version, I recommend this one. One of my very first Sierra experiences, and the owner of a very special place in my heart, King's Quest V, was the first Golden Age title in VGA, and it looks stunning, including the sumptuously hand-painted backgrounds that Sierra became famous for. By this time, the text parser of previous titles had been replaced with action icons, and it makes for a smooth, simple narrative experience. A CD-ROM talkie edition was released later, with voices done in-house by Sierra staff members, and it shows.
Graham, watch out! A poisonous snake!
The first in the series to feature a female protagonist, coming in the form of the titular Princess Rosella, King's Quest IV features both writing and art style that seems designed to draw in female players, who up until that point had been mostly shut out of a male-dominated industry. This sequel represents a return to the original formula, while also expanding upon it in a healthy way that King's Quest III was unable to. Here, Rosella is tasked with saving the life of a dying fairy queen and that of her very own father, but in doing so becomes the pawn of an evil witch queen and must perform nefarious tasks in order to save her loved ones. The game features absolutely gorgeous 16-color graphics, a cinematic storyline, and very enjoyable puzzles. A real classic. Probably no surprise to anyone familiar with the series, my top pick is a beautiful, cinematic world of top-notch fantasy that I desperately want to get lost in. King's Quest VI is the result of a company at the absolute top of their game, and it really shows. With gorgeous artwork, impeccable writing by the team of Roberta Williams and Jane Jensen, highly memorable locations, solid puzzle design, and an excellent voice cast including the great Robbie Benson, voice of Disney's Beast, as Prince Alexander.
If your existence has been all that you say it has, then truth alone shall be my sword.
King's Quest VI was a peak example of what the personal computer was capable of as a storytelling device, and remains a premier gaming experience to this very day. Well, that's all I have for now. Let me know what you think about my choices, and feel free to send me your own lists. I'd love to see them. Thanks everyone for joining me on this little trip down memory lane, and I'll see you next time.